Good morning, everyone. So today, good morning or good afternoon or good evening, wherever you are. So today, I'm pleased to be, compete with Teresa Antic. She's our strategist. She can strategize any data governance initiatives in many organizations. So we will talk to you more about like how to build a successful data governance roadmap. So there will be a lot of discussions around that area. So, Teresa, why don't you introduce yourself? So
Sure.
before you introduce, let me introduce myself. I'm Sharad Vashne. I run Ovaledge, and we will. So, Teresa, you go ahead.
Hi, my name is Teresa Yancic. I am a data governance evangelist and strategist, and I have been for the past 7 years deeply passionate and involved in data governance, the various ways that you can strategize and deploy it within the many different companies and organizations based on their particular drivers and goals and objectives.
Phenomenal. So I think that let's go to the directly deep dive into the content as we generally do. So the first thing is that as a part of this data governance, anybody starting data governance initiative, they need to have a roadmap. We call it roadmap. Some people call it project plan. Some people call it, So why there is a word called roadmap? Like why you choose the word roadmap is for to start with, as well as how it is different than project plan, and how it is like what is roadmap is all about.
Awesome. Well, the roadmap has been a tool that's evolved over time that I use to help organizations really understand what it is that they're trying to achieve, and do they have the capacity to meet those goals. I implemented accounting in various companies for 10 years, and the interesting thing about data governance is oftentimes there's different ideas about what data governance is, and there's also many, many different approaches. There are some organizations that want a business glossary term and definition for every field and every table. And then there's those that want to point data governance directly at their analytics. And then there are those that have a more pipeline focused approach. They really want to control the health and well-being of the data pipeline in addition to the business glossary. So really getting to understand what it is in your environment, what are your goals and objectives and drivers, and then being able to develop I was never big on charter documents before. I always thought they were something that people just wrote and nobody ever read, but they have saved me more than once by saying, this is where we decided data governance is going to be for us. And that way, when the team players come in and out, that charter document has been approved by the higher ups, and it keeps us on track and focused on meeting those objectives. So creating this roadmap really allows people to understand the different components of data governance and visualize what they want to attain under each one of these areas.
That's very good. So I think let me be more precise on that. The data governance objectives, when we are doing data governance, we are doing for some objectives, right? And they're trying to reduce some pain points.
Yes.
Right? And I believe that you call them as the drivers of data governance.
Yes.
Right? So help me understand that what are those drivers of the data governance are, and why why it is important to understand the drivers of the data governance before we move to build a comprehensive roadmap of data governance.
Understanding the drivers of what you're trying to achieve is important, and actually along with that is level setting what data governance, the definition.
Mm-hmm.
And that is going to be able to provide vision for your success metrics. So understanding what problems that you're trying to solve. We have 17,000 reports, and we've never retired technical debt. We've got metrics that are not calculated the same way. And one of the exercises that I do with companies is I've got a list of we want this, we want this, we want this. We want to reduce our adverse data events. We have way too many adverse data events. Well, that tells me that I need to lean into that data pipeline health and well-being as part of the plan if they have that at the top. We want transparency in our metrics because we've got the same thing being called two different things, and it's cost us thousands of dollars already in the past. And then I'm going to lean into being able to identify those metrics at the data consumption layer and bringing those into alignment. So it's really about identifying what it is, and pain points would be appropriate, but there's a reason why they came forward. It's also interesting that a lot of companies actually say, we want to answer the questions for an audit. That is very enlightening, especially to me as a strategist. Like, we're getting audited and now they're asking us questions about data governance and we don't have it, but we need to show that we have it. That is another conversation altogether, also very important to know. So that is why I think it's very important to understand the drivers, because if they don't know if they want it for an audit, let's get into what the audit is going to be looking for, but more, what is it that the company can achieve through that as well.
Yeah. So one of the example I have with the metrics is, I think that you may be aware that Twitter going through the selling process to Elon Musk. And
Twitter, yeah.
Twitter, right?
Yeah.
So in that process, when they disclose their financial numbers as a public offering, they said that fraud rate is 5%.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no definition was provided for the fraud rate. So Elon Musk understand that, oh, okay, the fraud rate is 5%. Okay. So when he asked that, hey, what is the detail in this in the fraud rate? He said, by the way, we surveyed 100 people and we found 500 fraud. So that is the actual way.
That was how fraud was developed, right?
That is their definition of the fraud, and this is our fraud rate. Now these are the metrics which has been kind of reported to the SECs. So there are metrics which is reported to SECs, which we call it like critical data element, and this have a huge ramification of that.
Yeah.
$1 billion lawsuit is coming because of that same thing, and Twitter might lose it because they have not disclosed it.
Right.
The definition of proper definition.
Right? How did you come up with
How
that?
did you come up with this number? Yeah. Only otherwise there is no way they will lose that lawsuit. Although Elon Musk will not buy it anyway,
right?
Because it's not in business interest. That's a different case. But they will. It's a $1 billion. If they have a right data governance practice to start with, they will not have $1 billion lawsuit on them.
That is an excellent example.
So,
and there's micro examples of that all over.
A huge impact. People sometimes we underestimate that thousands of dollars impact. Thousands of dollar impact on any metrics, and at the lower level metrics when the PMs and project managers are making decisions, because this is only because they are making decisions on their performance and their etc. So the hundreds of thousands of dollars can be benefited from that. But if you as higher you go, the impact is even more high on the metrics. That's why the data governance, is there a way to identify the metrics in your roadmap, which is like critical data element versus non-critical data element? Do you start with that somehow?
Yeah, one of the things that I really like about Ovaledge is the ability to get into that data demand layer, and you start looking at what is repeating itself over and over again across your reporting and dashboards. So you have the ability to take a look at those terms and metrics and then do an impact analysis, looking where are these terms coming from and what are the calculations. And it's surprising how often you find that the same term has got a different mathematical calculation against it. Anything that's time-based is also lends itself to having those kind of interpretations when anchoring. And the other point I want to make is the higher up you go, the more risk you have of those metrics from disparate calculations being combined into the same thing and presented to your CEO. So it's becoming really important that you have certified reporting when you present it to any CEO or higher up that is in the position of making $1 million decisions for the organization. It has to be absolutely clear in definition, clear in where we came from, clear in who owns it, and clear in what the result is.
So that is the one of the objective of the data governance program, to really define clarity into the process.
Absolutely. Clarity and quality. across the board.
So that is the one part of the data governance driver. Another part, you said the data governance driver is about the compliance and auditing part of it. So again, that comes down to the same, we take an example of like, there is a banking regulation, BCBS, there are various kind of regulations which actually ask people to, when they are voting things, there is an audit requirement for them that when they publish this information, they need to have a backtrack of that how this calculation has been created.
Correct.
There is a consistency into this. So this process has been defined by regulators of different industries to start with, right? So that is another objective. What you're saying is that for the data, the drivers of the data governance
is to be able to have those critical metrics clearly delineated with transparency all the way back to the source for those compliance and auditors, and also have a way to help those auditors make sure that in the compliance department that the policies are being adhered to, and detection methods for when they're not.
Yeah. So once we find out all the drivers of the data governance, what are the risks and barriers you see that is a problem in creating a good data governance roadmap?
Yes.
What are those, what is okay, this is very good, we want to provide it, but what are the challenges you face in order to build the roadmap?
I actually have an exercise that I do when I introduce myself to a new customer, and that is talking about risks and barriers and which one of these 20, 25 things speak to you the most, because that gives me really good insight as a strategist on what types of strategies we're going to use in order to overcome those. Oftentimes there's a lack of leadership, executive sponsorship in the program. Oftentimes I see too that people aren't really clear on what their role is, and they don't understand the benefit of data governance. Or the company expected to hire one person to bring data governance in, and that's all they need. So those are the kind of risks and barriers. We could do an hour conversation just on risks and barriers. There's a few.
Yeah, so the communication problem, enterprise engagement issues, as you have laid out in your blog, like staffing and capacity barrier, as you just mentioned. Those are the various, the barriers and the risk of the data governance.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's very good. So I think that another thing as we move forward further and we are trying to create a data governance roadmap, I think you have laid out in your blog, and we will share this blog very soon, is that these are various stages of data governance. You call them grassroots, passive, progressive, full function.
Yeah.
So help us understand that what are those stages of the data governance are, and how do we determine what kind of organization we are, and how should we choose which one is good for me versus which one is good for this one. I know this is a little bit lengthy conversation,
that's okay.
But that's something that we want to really understand, that what is the difference between the grassroots, passive, progressive, and full function.
So grassroots is, what I did is I broke it down into the 4 areas of people that usually approach me and want strategy supports. And they tend to fall into 4 categories, and there's definitely overlap. But it helps me when I'm speaking to someone to say, how do you see yourself? And I've outlined all the components of grassroots and the characteristics of a unidimensional or passive, where it's all embedded in your BI team, or there's only one team involved, essentially, and they're using, they're putting some underpinnings in, but they haven't quite gotten to where they've invited compliance and security and the business members to the table. But they're doing things that are governing the terms on their reports, and they're doing things that are oftentimes leaning heavily into the health and well-being of the data pipeline, which is always good. And they're looking for help to bring business and the other components to the table. Grassroots is oftentimes where it's they're passionate, they've got a tool, they don't have executive sponsorship yet. We're going to lean into that pretty much from the beginning, and I'm going to empower them in order to get that sponsorship, get a budget for next year, and start teaching the benefits and the return on investment of data governance so that people start having that common understanding of what it is. And then you've got the progressive
So
teams.
let me double-click on the grassroots only. So what I understood from the grassroots, that is generally driven by a department or BI department.
Yeah, a lot of times it's driven by the BI team. Sometimes it's been, I've seen it in compliance.
To compliance.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
but compliance, it is very difficult for compliance team to do by alone because they are only 1 or 2 team members alone, and
Yes.
they have no even have access to the data. And if BI team have access to the data, they can go, they can figure out, they can see the lineage where the data come from. They have all the
Right.
all the techniques, but in the compliance group, then they have to involve the BI group in order to do the.
Yes, we need to start making those connections with the other team members and start working together to contribute to and draw from data governance.
Yeah, so that's good. Then the second one is when you're going through grassroots is passive. So help us understand a little bit about passive data governance.
Yeah, the unidimensional or their single team data governance. It's all held within one team. Oftentimes it is in the BI team, where they've started really posting their assets, their data assets with those definitions. They usually have a definition per each report. Rather than saying every single report has to meet this definition policy. So I help with that conversation. Let's compress that data demand layer and down into finding out what people are asking for and really getting clear on what the source is, what the handling is, what is the definition, and where can I find it. And then getting them also to get that executive sponsorship. And what does a data governance team look like, a domain team, and what would a committee agenda look like? That's when we really start getting into, let's envision what happens when we get all these people to the table. Who's responsible for what? We really start defining the roles of how to properly curate our data assets and our terms.
Wonderful. So now let's just move from this one to progressive, which is, I think, the word which we have created. Like, what do you mean by when we say progressive?
Yeah.
And how it is different than full function data governance? So let's move on.
When you look at all of the different dimensions of data governance, you can pretty much see how difficult it would to start executing across every one of those dimensions on the roadmap. So progressive is really taking a look at where do you want to anchor your program while we build out the underpinnings. And I can't say enough about building out those underpinnings. A lot of times when I get called in to pull a program out of peril, it is because we've got 3 data governance committees up and running, but we didn't take the time to put in our services, and we've got chaos. People are emailing for an impact analysis. Nobody's clear on who's going to get what and how long it's going to take. We don't have any SLAs. So when you get into progressive, you've got your domains and your committees spinning up, but we were also really establishing that data governance team as a service to the organization. We provide you the ability to, if you have a data set you want governed, here's your catalog, and an analyst is going to come in and help you. If you are about to upgrade your application, we will provide you with a schema compare so that your project can include its impact on the downstream assets and anything that's leaning against that upgrade. So there is a list of services that can be developed, and you really want to be able to keep track of it so that you can include it in your success metrics and provide quality services to the organization and avoid that chaos.
So this gives me a very, I'm sorry for disturbing, but I think that this gives you a very interesting point. So the what is in the progressive data governance is running as a deliverable mechanism. So it's not a like most of the compliance team, hey, do this,
Yeah.
and I don't care,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. But here you are making them responsible
Right.
to do certain work for you.
Yeah.
So this is actually, it's like IT department. IT department, you ask them, hey, can you install the software for me? They install the software for you.
And
There's a
way to
value which
ask.
comes out of it.
Yes.
Here you say, hey, these are the data governance I wanted you to govern for me. Govern in the sense you want to make sure that they are, like for example, financial reporting.
Yeah.
You want financial reporting to be governed so that we'll not have a debacle of, $1 billion lawsuit.
Right.
Or you want your regulatory reporting, all the things governed to me. You want
Right.
all the critical data assets which the CEOs and CFOs and all the C executives are making.
Right.
So you say, okay, these are the data assets to start with. Can you govern for us? And that is the
Or help me govern them.
help me govern.
Yeah, and it's kind of I know governance has got a bad connotation to it, and a lot of people want to go with a different term. But it's really servant leadership. If you take an enablement approach, we are responsible for providing you with the space to create your business glossary, and then helping to make sure that you are meeting the standards of what a good business term curation is, and that we're continually drawing that tribal knowledge out of the organization and into that business glossary, so that we have robust definitions that fully explain, and we don't have like 5-word definitions in our business glossary.
Okay, so I think that some people are complaining our audio is not very good, so I think we have a little bit loud or a little bit nearby so that it can be.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem. I think that's sorry about this a little bit. But I think we will share the recording as well as we have the blog where most of the things we are discussing. Of course, those are not in. And when you're reading things, then in different perspective you get it, and when we see it in natural language, you get a different perspective. So let's go to a little bit like full function data governance.
Okay.
What is full function data governance is, and how it is different than progressive?
Full function is when you've progressed through data governance. We understand the reports that we have that we're going to curate and hold dear. We understand the data pipeline, and we're really leaning into, when you get into the full function data governance, it's about how do we manage the backlogs of report requests so that we are removing frivolous requests, we are not duplicating things that already exist in the application. And when a report request comes to move to a new data asset to production, how do we get the definitions and the policies applied closer to the source? So it becomes part of the request to move to production. We know who wrote it. We know if it's analytical, operational, or regulatory reporting. We know who the owner is, why it was built, what decisions are being made on that report. So we're really curating it and carefully setting it into our asset library so that others can discover and understand what's on that report as well. And to make sure that if we're calling it this on the report, that it still meets all of the term policies, if you will, for the items that are used on that report. When there's an IT project, how do we include what we need from the data governance team and what the data governance team needs from us closer to the source? So it's really when you're handling that cultural impact, and it becomes part of your everyday workload.
So I think that we have the right definitions for all, the 4 ways you can build a roadmap item. So let's understand that a little bit about that. We create the roadmap. What are the steps you generally take in order to build the roadmap? Let me walk through it. If we hire you as a strategist,
Okay.
what are you going to do, and what can, like, there's somebody who can't afford you, or somewhere they want to just start the program to ahead of time. How should they kind of like just work through out by themselves and can get it, at least start some of the program by themselves so that they can have the funding for the data governance initiatives and at least start working through it. So help me understand that part.
Okay, that is a big question. If you are working on your roadmap by yourself, I would recommend that you take a look at all of these dimensions and ask yourself what it is that drives your company towards this. Are you embedding your program in your analytics for analytics support, and then you're going to grow it out from there? And I do recommend that you anchor your program in a specific domain and data set where you have a very strong data owner and advocate, strong data stewards that understand that you're piloting this and that will work with you to refine things as they need to be refined and be a part of that conversation. Somebody, gosh, I wish I could remember who, was explaining that when you deploy data governance and in the cultural change of it, just like sending a rocket to space, that first payload has got most of the fuel, and the same goes when you're establishing a new program. So work with a team that is in an area that aligns with your drivers, that has a strong advocacy group. If you're seeking to get executive sponsorship, find a strong C-suite executive that believes in data governance and understands the return on investment and is willing to go to bat for you for budgeting, team, vision, and meet with them often. I do have communication planning on here, and I think that it's critically important to understand in your communication plan and also your success metrics. What does success look like for you? Asking that question often is a smart idea, and to be able to say, report up everything that you need. Originally, and I'm looking at the first page of the roadmap where it's got all the colors and the different dimensions, that was developed so that you can identify a vision for each one of those areas independently and then be able to report up to the executive team where you're at with each one of those areas, but also get into your worksheets where you get into the underpinnings and the nuts and bolts of each one of those dimensions, and gives that data governor the ability to both create that reporting to the executive council, but also understand where you're at more myopically within each area. So when you click on that roadmap, each area opens up into a workspace of its own, where you can identify what types of drivers and objectives that you are trying to achieve for each area. I'll go into communication, for example. In that worksheet, we talk about what do we want to communicate, how often do we want to communicate it, what media do we want to communicate it on. And you can put everything you possibly want. I want to communicate to the executive council, and I want to do it on a PowerPoint, and here's a template of that communication. And what things can I put on there, right? So I want to tell the council how many adverse data events we had this month and what was the root cause. I want to tell the council how many PII exposures were reported this month and what was the remediation of those. I want to tell the council all of the new data sources that we crawled and how many new terms we were able to curate. These things are all thought out in that communication plan of how do we want to communicate and how often and who's going to be responsible and what media. I also want to do a monthly newsletter because I want to bring data governance to the forefront of everybody's mind. So we are going to do a monthly newsletter on this media, and these are the types. We want to include a superstar of the month, somebody that's been a high contributor. I also want to be able to report some success metrics there, and I want to advertise how you can get our help for data governance on that newsletter.
So just for all the audience, this is the roadmap and the blog we're talking about, roadmap for successful data governance. You can go to the ovaledge.com/blog/data governance roadmap, and you can see the entire, whatever the discussion we are doing actually is mentioned here.
Mm-hmm.
Just for the audience, I want to just explain that this is already here, whatever we're discussing. So if you want to read through it in that time, just easy read.
Right.
So it'll take 10 minutes. But let's continue the discussion even further. As you said that I want to take it a little bit back
Okay.
and see that why we, like, when we build this roadmap, as you said that, like, we want to report the success metrics to the our executive, right?
Yes.
So what I have seen the challenges is most of the customers have faced that is that, um, what is the final success look like for me? And like for example, if I'm running an IT project,
Yeah.
right? It's very easy that, okay, now my system is go live, I'm live, and my data governance, my I can roll out back.
Yeah.
What is the success of data governance program look like if we invest heavily into the data governance, if a
Right.
company invests heavily into the data governance, what is the shiny picture they want to get out of it?
Yeah.
Like, how does it a very governed a bank or a hospital
Yeah.
or a fintech, how does it look like? What is the advantage of that? Like, what they will not, what kind of problems they will not have it?
Yes. And that folds two concepts. What is the return on investment? And then what does success look like versus your success metrics?
Mm-hmm.
Your success metrics indicates, things that you can measure towards that end. And measuring engagement, how many people are relying on the business glossary to understand the data that they're looking at? One of the things that I promote, and I also promote within my clients, is to do a quick survey on how much confidence do you have. I'm new to this. Let me introduce myself. I'm committed to improving your data experience. Tell me on a scale of 1 to 10, how confident and trusting are you in our ability to manage the data? And tell me what you think I should focus on first. And I give them 10 things to focus on in a paragraph to give me any additional information. That information lets me know where I started. And then after I've done my communication, I've got success metrics, I've got terms, most importantly, we've got certified reporting. In the next year or two, you're going to notice that when we do have an adverse data event, you're going to be communicated with ahead of time. I'm going to gain your trust, and I'm going to watch them tell me that I went from a 2 to an 8 in their confidence in our ability to manage the data and the data pipeline. That is often a really good indicator of the success when you're embarking on data governance. And also you get some really interesting feedback in that additional space from folks that have, if you are battling against an environment where there's just no confidence in the data.
Now, the second, another question I will take it is that what is the role of data quality in terms of data governance? Like,
Yeah.
does it comes under the part of data governance, or is it a separate discipline altogether?
Data quality is a discipline in and of itself. And if a lot of folks create a data operations team similar to a DevOps team in application development, and that team's focus is on the quality of the data assets. Their huddles in the morning look like, are the reports all out? How many didn't go out? Did we have ETL failures? Was there a server outage? Is there anybody we need to communicate to? They are responsible for communicating, collecting, triaging any break fix on the reporting layer so that we are able to really manage that. And you may find that an ETL broke because of a compound primary key. Not ideal. We want to change the way we do that. So we're also going to be proactively creating data quality so that you have the ability to capture events and report it back to the business before you have breaks down here so that they can be fixed at the end of the day. So data quality is one of the things that I'm very passionate about. I'll be speaking in December on proactive and reactive data quality techniques and tips for standing up that program. But being able to really react to incoming data quality issues is probably one of the first steps that I recommend that organizations take. They usually have something in place, but really refining that so that we're getting into that who's looking at the reports. So we get the data quality issue reported to us on here. We're going to root cause analysis, and then we're going to say how many reports was it impacted and how many users were impacted by that quality event. And that's what I'm going to report up to the executive council, but I'm also going to give a heads up communication wise that to everyone impacted by that.
So the data governance committees which you are creating is a part of the data governance group. How can they contribute towards the data quality as well?
How the data governance committees can support data quality, and it is important that we have that conduit for communication. When we curate a term and we say, here is the original source where that term is introduced into our ecosystem, I would like to, whenever possible, get my definition from the people that are closest to where it's brought in. They tend to know more about that data and the term and what it means at its inception than anyone else. And you'd be surprised at how often what we think we're looking at meant something different when it was born.
So give me an interesting example of something you feel that that source definition versus I generally see that activity data is activity data. Like people like, oh, this is like they describe it, but what does a good definition look like for something? Give me whatever you feel like. So that people get the idea that when we say curating the term, what do you really mean by it?
Yeah, where is it being brought in? So you can say what the definition of customer is, right? But when you're looking at customer names, you can have a customer name that was reported to you from the customer through a website that was just looking to get some information, right? I am likely to call myself Princess Buttercup on your website. But let's say I decide I want to become a loyalty member, and now my name is checked against my driver's license. So that name has a higher accuracy rate and quality for a customer name than a customer name reported the misspellings. I don't care if there's an H in it. There's different levels of quality between this customer name that is checked against other second sources of information where it's program related. So you want to be able to say, okay, what I'm looking at is a customer name that was reported here versus here, because the definition may change. There are other things that can create confusion as well, like a closed loan. What is a closed loan? It means something to underwriting over here, but it means something else to the warehousing team. And so they close it when it's sold to, Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, but the underwriting team calls it a closed loan when they've sent the wire transfer out and the loan has been granted.
So that is very interesting because the customer name for me is more of the master data management problem.
Right.
Is okay because that problem, like of course, the definition does matter.
Yeah.
But the closed loan is a very interesting. So what he's saying is the closed loan for underwriter is different than data warehousing team because they might. Because right now we're looking at the loan and loan status.
Yeah.
Loan status closed.
Yeah.
But definition of them for different people. Oh, I closed my loan means I have. So for the people who are selling the loan, for example, if I'm selling the loan, I closed it means I have contributed my work to my customer.
Right.
While on this one for underwriters, okay, I have closed it. That means I have got the payment or something for this one. So the same loan is going to multiple closure.
Right.
And so it cannot be the loan status can be the closed loan. So as a data governance team, we will sit together and divide, we will call it like a closed at this one and closed at this level. So that's something you will divide and figure out what should be the status part of the committee meetings.
And another example is for your contract IDs. We were curating contract ID and you get to where it's coming in. First off, contract ID is too vague. What kind of contract ID is it? So let's refine that. But what we found when we went to the people that were creating those contract IDs into our system is that they were sharing the first 2 digits mean something and the last 3 digits mean something else. Because we went to where the data was being brought in, people that got that definition were like, oh my gosh, I've been here for 5 years, I've never known that. So now we were able to check the first two digits against the meaning of it, and then refine that we were calling it the same thing in our system as
And maybe double
further
check
down the
whether
line. Yes,
the quality of the data, because
we
you already have
created a
contract
quality
type.
check.
Okay.
Yes.
And suddenly, because we have a contract type here, and the contract ID, and the first two digits belong to contract type, some sort of a mapping is there, so we can see whether the mapping is right or wrong.
So now we know that it's going to be assigned to the proper team and deployed in the right way, which could have cost us thousands.
Yeah, it's not only, it's an issue around like compliances as well. Like if a different contract has been signed with different type of people, that means that you're not following the right, especially the government organizations, especially the organizations, which is very sensitive to this. Like for us, it's simple. All the contracts are signed by one or two people.
Right.
But if you go to larger organizations, the multiple people are signing different contracts, different processes out there. They go through different legal reviews. So the whole processes are different for them. So that's why it's very important to understand that.
Yeah.
So those are the people. One thing is that it's basically the role of data governance is to give that clarity to the data, right? Because data naked, it does not produce any value.
Well, contract ID.
There's a context.
Contract ID is going to appear 75 times in your system, but where's the proper way to pull it into your data warehouse, and what is the proper handling of it?
Wonderful. So I think we are running out of time, and there's a lot of things we can discuss. So I will
should do this again.
We will do it again, and we will have more level of inside discussions. But again, thank you very much for this one.
Thank you for having me.
And again, for audience, if you have any further questions or anything, I would love to answer them over the chat. And I know there's multiple questions are coming up. Regarding all the questions around tool and how does it do it, we will do another webinar soon. We will kind of doing a demo of Ovaledge, kind of for them to see the product in real life action. But this one is mostly focused about the roadmap and how we build the roadmap of data governance and how we start the program to start. Right? So this is what the more of the focus on that one. Again, a lot of things you can read in the blog, which we just shared. And it's a very insightful blog. You would be amazed at how much insightful information that blog is having.
Thank you.
So thank you for writing this blog. It's really a phenomenal blog. And thank you for joining this webinar. And we will be posting this also on YouTube, so you all can watch it whenever you want. Again, thank you very much. Have a good one. Thanks.
Thank you.